Welcome to World Update on the Persecuted Church with Release International. Coming up in the program,
we promise to protect the identity of this house church leader. She said the crackdown has caused Christians to grow stronger and more serious. God is testing our faith because he wants us to become more like Jesus, she said.
I think this is a significant change in history because the hardcore religious fundamentalists lost big time.
Many Muslim scholars issued the fatwa saying I must be killed. On television, people were saying if they meet me on the streets, they will kill me.
First, the headlines. Iran in the turmoil, the church is growing despite President Ahmadinejad's vow to stop Christianity in the country. India, amid post-election hopes for more religious tolerance, a pastor is attacked and there is renewed violence against Christian refugees in Orissa. Egypt, the government is stonewalling Christians from Muslim backgrounds who want to change their religion on their ID cards. And China, fears grow for a kidnapped Christian lawyer, and a Christian bookstore owner is jailed for 3 years after printing and giving away Bibles. With Iran in turmoil following the elections, Christians are praying the new government will scrap plans to introduce a mandatory death sentence for Muslim men who decide to change their religion. Many Christians have fled Iran since the introduction of hardline Islamic law. But despite persecution, the underground church continues to grow. CBN's Gary Lane reports.
The idea behind the Iranian Revolution was to establish the world's first modern state governed solely by Islamic law. Ayatollah Khomeini believed a more prosperous society could be created if the Iranian people and their government adhered to tenets of the Quran. But nearly 30 years on, the revolution is faltering, and many Iranians are disillusioned. Todd Nettleton is with the Voice of the Martyrs.
The people look around, they see the poverty, they see the discontent, they're not happy. And so they have questions. Well, why isn't it working out? You know, we're doing it the Islamic way. Why isn't our country great? And so they are ripe to hear a new way.
And the new way many are embracing is Christianity. But the faith is not new to Iran. The gospel actually arrived here 500 years before Islam. Persians are believed to have been among those in Jerusalem at Pentecost. Less than 0.5% of the Iranian population is Christian. There were nearly 4 times as many Christians just before the Islamic Revolution. But many fled the country because of Islamic extremism. Christian praise songs blast from the cassette player of this Iranian taxicab. The driver is a Muslim convert to Christianity. Despite risk of arrest and possible death for apostasy, he's unafraid to share his faith. A cross hangs from his rearview mirror. He keeps his Bible on the front passenger seat beside a can of STP gas treatment. He shares the gospel with his passengers and gives them a Bible if they want one. That alone could lead to his arrest. Other Christians have been martyred for sharing their faith with Muslims. Just this past summer, a war veteran and his wife died from beatings they received during a raid on their house church meeting in the city of Isfahan. A month earlier, Christian Tina Rod and her husband were arrested and severely beaten, held for 4 days. They were accused of committing activities against Islam and Iranian national security. Both are former Muslims. We promise to protect the identity of this house church leader. She said the crackdown has caused Christians to grow stronger and more serious. God is testing our faith because he wants us to become more like Jesus, she said. What should Christians around the world know about their brothers and sisters in the faith in Iran? The house church leader tells us they should know that Jesus Christ is with Iranian Christians and will never leave them nor forsake them. And what can believers around the world do for the persecuted Christians in Iran?
We have to pray for them. That is their first request. Pray for us, pray for us, pray for us. And I challenge people really to pray for the Iranian government. Pray for Ahmadinejad to have a personal meeting with Jesus Christ. Imagine how that would change that country. Imagine how that would change the world.
Gary Lane, CBN News, Tehran, Iran.
News agency Compass Direct says 50 Christians were arrested in Iran in 2008. India, as Christians give thanks for a vote against religious extremism in the country's elections, attacks on Christians continue. A pastor was attacked by a gang of Hindu extremists who challenged him about evangelism and beat him with fists and clubs before leaving him for dead. And in Orissa, scene of much violence against Christians, refugees who were driven from their homes are facing further attacks as security forces protecting them begin to pull out. Even so, KP Yohanan from Gospel for Asia says the election results were seen by Christians as a step in the right direction.
This is an incredible statement. The 250 million Dalits and 300 million backward caste, two-thirds of the country spoke very loud and clear. If politicians want to hear it, they must hear it. That is, they will not put up with abuse of the minority and killing Christians and burning down churches. I think this is a significant change in history because the hardcore religious fundamentalists lost big time. And I believe next 5 years, there will be a tremendous opportunity for the church to express Christ's love and bring peace and reconciliation for the people.
China now. Concern is growing for Christian human rights lawyer Gao Shisheng, who's disappeared. Gao claims the authorities tortured him for standing up for human rights in China. He says they threatened him with death if he spoke out. But Gao released a video reenactment to show the world what he went through. He's since disappeared.
These words of mine will be eventually heard by the world. They will bring to light the true colors of the Chinese Communist Party.
And still in China, a Beijing court has jailed Christian bookshop owner Shui Han for 3 years for conducting an illegal business operation. He printed Bibles and gave them free of charge. In Egypt, Christians are being driven into hiding after a court barred them from changing the religious status on their ID cards from Muslim to Christian. Mohammed Hegazi has faced death threats and is in hiding with his wife and daughter. Release partner Greg Musselman reports.
Muhammad became a follower of Jesus over 10 years ago when he was 16, and his new faith was tested early and often. When his father, who hated Christians, learned his son had become one, he was very angry and threatened him with death. State security were called in, and Muhammad was arrested and then questioned by a very aggressive officer.
His questions were about who helped you to embrace Christianity, and he wanted to know names of the people. But I told him my testimony about how I listened to the Christian radio station and that nobody helped me to become a Christian. So he spent 3 days torturing me. He was beating me. He was whipping me. He was putting his shoes into my face. After 3 days, the officer brought in a Muslim scholar who tried to convince me to return to Islam, and I told him I didn't need anyone to convince me because I was a Christian.
Muhammad, Christina, and Miriam remain in hiding because of Muhammad's desire to change the religion on their identification cards, a desire that has caused a major uproar in Egypt.
Many Muslim scholars issued the fatwa saying I must be killed. On television, people were saying if they meet me on the streets, they will kill me.
Release's Canadian partner has helped provide shelter and safe houses for Mohammed and his family, along with other Christians from Muslim backgrounds facing similar trials. Meanwhile, an Egyptian court has refused permission for another Christian to change his religious status on his ID card. Maher El-Ghahari's been attacked on the street, subject to death threats and driven into hiding. He too says he'll appeal. Please pray for these Christians who want the right to change their religious status, that they'll be successful and able to worship and live in freedom. That's it for this edition. If you've been moved by what you've seen, then there is something you can do. Join us in partnership with the persecuted church by signing up for Release magazine, available from the Release International website. Goodbye and God bless.